The stranger rode into Grass Valley, California, on a February afternoon in 1878, when the sky threatened rain, and the wind carried the scent of pine from the distant mountains, and he heard a sound that would change his life forever. A woman weeping as though her heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces. Lucas Yates had been traveling for 3 months, moving from town to town with no particular destination in mind. At 26, he had seen enough of the world to know that settling down was not for men like him, men who carried ghosts in their saddlebags and regrets in their pockets. His horse, a sturdy sorrel mare named Juniper, had carried him through Nevada's deserts and over the Sierra Nevada mountains. And now, they found themselves in this small mining town where the promise of gold had long since faded. The sound came from a small cabin at the edge of town, set back from the main street where the general store and saloon stood shoulder to shoulder. Lucas normally would have kept riding, but something in that cry pierced through the armor he had built around his heart. He dismounted, tying Juniper to a fence post, and approached the cabin with careful steps. Through the open window, he could see her. A woman, perhaps 23 or 24, with honey-colored hair that fell loose around her shoulders, bent over a wooden cradle. Her shoulders shook with sobs, and her hands gripped the cradle's edge so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The cradle was empty, lined with a carefully sewn quilt, but holding nothing but air and sorrow. Lucas stood there, uncertain. He was a man more comfortable with horses and hard ground than with tears and grief. But something held him there, rooted to the spot, watching this stranger's pain and feeling it echo in his own chest. She must have sensed his presence because she looked up suddenly, her eyes red and swollen, her face pale as moonlight. For a moment they simply stared at each other through the window frame, two souls suspended in time. "I am sorry," Lucas said, his voice rough from disuse. "I heard crying. I wanted to make sure you were not in danger." The woman wiped at her face with the back of her hand, attempting to compose herself, but fresh tears spilled over her cheeks. "I am perfectly safe," she said, though her voice trembled. "Please go about your business." Lucas should have done exactly that. He should have tipped his hat, mounted Juniper, and ridden away. Instead, he found himself asking, "Are you sure about that?" She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "No," she admitted. "No, I am not sure about anything anymore." He walked around to the front door, which stood slightly ajar. "May I come in?" She hesitated, then nodded. What did it matter now? What did anything matter? Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. A small stove sat in one corner, a table with 2 chairs in the center, and against the far wall that empty cradle. Lucas removed his hat, holding it in his hands, suddenly aware of how dusty and trail-worn he must look. "My name is Lucas Yates," he offered. "I have been traveling through, but I can stay and listen if you need someone to talk to." The woman looked at him with eyes the color of summer grass, searching his face for something he could not name. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she sank into one of the chairs and gestured for him to take the other. "Beatrice Jenkins," she said quietly, "though I suppose it does not matter much who I am anymore." Lucas sat, placing his hat on the table. "Why would you say that?" Beatrice looked toward the cradle and her face crumpled. "I lost my baby," she whispered. 3 weeks ago. My daughter. She was only 2 months old. The fever came so quickly. One day she was nursing and smiling, and the next she was burning up, and then she was gone." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible. Lucas felt his throat tighten. He had known loss, had buried friends and family, but he could not imagine the particular agony of losing a child. "I am so sorry," he said, and the words felt inadequate, but what else was there to say? "Her father never even met her," Beatrice continued, as if a dam had broken and the words could not be stopped. David died in a mining accident before she was born. 7 months I carried his child alone, hoping she would be a piece of him I could keep. And now they are both gone, and I am here in this cabin with nothing but an empty cradle and memories." Lucas reached across the table and, after a moment's hesitation, covered her hand with his own. Her skin was cold, and she startled at the touch but did not pull away. "You are still here," he said firmly. "That is not nothing." "It feels like nothing," Beatrice whispered. "I wake up every morning and forget for just a moment, and then I remember and it hits me all over again. I hear phantom cries in the night. I wake up thinking I need to nurse her. Yesterday, I was at the general store and Mrs. Patterson asked me how the baby was doing, and I just stood there unable to speak, because saying the words out loud makes it real." They sat in silence for a long moment, hands connected across the table. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes. "Where is she buried?" Lucas asked gently. "On the hill behind the church, under an oak tree. I visit her every day." Beatrice finally pulled her hand back, wiping at her eyes again. "You must think I am a mess." "I think you are a mother grieving her child," Lucas said. "There is no shame in that." Beatrice looked at him with something like wonder. "Who are you, Lucas Yates? Why did you stop here?" He could not answer that, not honestly, because he did not fully understand it himself. "Sometimes we are where we are supposed to be," he said instead. She stood up, moving to the stove. "I should offer you coffee, at least. You came in here and listened to a stranger pour out her sorrows. The least I can do is give you something warm to drink." Lucas watched as she went through the motions of making coffee, her movements practiced and automatic. She was a beautiful woman, he realized, even with grief etched into every line of her face. There was strength there, too, in the set of her shoulders, and the way she held herself together despite the pain threatening to tear her apart. "How long are you planning to stay in Grass Valley?" Beatrice asked, as she poured coffee into 2 tin cups. "I had not planned to stay at all," Lucas admitted. "But I suppose I could remain a few days. Juniper could use the rest, and I could use work if there is any to be found. Mr. Hawkins at the general store mentioned needing someone to help repair his storage barn. The winter storms damaged the roof." Beatrice set a cup in front of him. "And Mrs. Chen at the boarding house always has odd jobs that need doing." Lucas sipped the coffee, which was strong and good. "Thank you. I will look into those opportunities." They talked for another hour, the conversation drifting from practical matters to stories from their pasts. Lucas learned that Beatrice had come to California from Missouri 3 years ago with her husband David, full of dreams about striking it rich. Those dreams had died along with David, buried under tons of rock and earth when a mine shaft collapsed. She had been 2 months pregnant at the time, frightened and alone in a strange place, but she had been determined to survive for the sake of the baby she carried. Lucas shared his own story, though he edited out the darker parts. He had grown up in Texas, the youngest of 4 sons. His family had run cattle until the drought of '73 took their herd and their livelihood. His parents had died the following winter, his brothers had scattered, and Lucas had started wandering, picking up work where he could find it, never staying long enough to put down roots. "That sounds lonely," Beatrice observed. "It is," Lucas admitted, "but I have gotten used to it." "I do not think people ever truly get used to being alone," Beatrice said softly. "I think we just get better at pretending it does not hurt." Those words stayed with Lucas as he finally took his leave, promising to return the next day to check on her. He found a spot at the boarding house Mrs. Chen ran, a tidy establishment where the sheets were clean and the meals were hearty. That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed, he thought about Beatrice Jenkins and her empty cradle, and he wondered what had truly made him stop at her cabin. The next morning, Lucas went to the general store and spoke with Mr. Hawkins about the barn repair. The man was grateful for the help and offered fair wages. Lucas spent the day on the roof, replacing damaged shingles and patching holes, his muscles remembering the rhythm of physical labor. It felt good to be useful, to be building instead of just wandering. When the workday ended, Lucas found himself walking toward Beatrice's cabin without consciously deciding to go there. She opened the door at his knock, and he saw that she had combed her hair and put on a clean dress. The change was small but significant. "I thought you might want company for supper," Lucas said, holding up a package from Mrs. Chen. She sent meat pies and fresh bread. Beatrice smiled, and it transformed her face. "Come in. I was just thinking how quiet the evening was going to be." They ate together, and Lucas was pleased to see Beatrice manage more than a few bites. Afterward, she surprised him by asking, "Would you walk with me to visit my daughter's grave? I know it is a strange request, but I do not want to go alone tonight." "It is not strange at all," Lucas assured her. "I would be honored." The cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the town, surrounded by a low fence. The oak tree Beatrice had mentioned stood near the back, its branches bare but strong. Beneath it, a small marker bore the words Rose Marie Jenkins, December 1877 to January 1878, beloved daughter. Beatrice knelt beside the grave, placing her hand on the cold earth. Lucas stood a respectful distance away, giving her space for her private grief. The sky above them had cleared, revealing a field of stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. "I named her Rose because roses were David's favorite flower," Beatrice said quietly. "He used to bring them to me when he could afford to buy them, or sometimes he would just pick wild ones from the hillside. I thought if I named her Rose, it would be like having a piece of him in the world." "It is a beautiful name," Lucas said. Beatrice stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Tell me honestly, Lucas, do you think this pain will ever lessen? Will there ever be a day when I can breathe without feeling like my chest is being crushed?" Lucas thought carefully before answering. "I think the pain changes," he said finally. "It does not go away, but it becomes something you can carry, like a stone in your pocket. Some days you barely notice it, and other days it feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds, but you learn to walk with it." "Have you lost someone?" Beatrice asked. "My mother," Lucas said, "and my father and friends. Each loss is different, but the learning to live with it is the same." They walked back to the cabin slowly, neither of them in a hurry to end the evening. At her door, Beatrice turned to him and said, "Thank you, Lucas, for listening, for caring, for being here when you could have just ridden past." "I am glad I stopped," Lucas said, and he meant it with his whole heart. Over the next week, a pattern emerged. Lucas would work during the day, repairing Mr. Hawkins's barn and taking on other odd jobs around town. In the evenings, he would visit Beatrice. Sometimes they would talk, sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, and twice more they walked to the cemetery together. Lucas began to notice small changes in Beatrice. She smiled more often. The shadows under her eyes began to fade. She started taking care with her appearance again, not out of vanity but out of a returning sense of self. One evening, Lucas arrived to find Beatrice had actually cooked a full meal instead of just heating something up. The cabin smelled of roasted chicken and herbs, and she had set the table with care. "I wanted to thank you properly," Beatrice explained as she served the food. "You have been so kind to me these past weeks. I do not know what I would have done without you." "You would have survived," Lucas said. "You are stronger than you think." "Perhaps," Beatrice allowed, "but surviving is easier when you are not alone." They ate, and the conversation flowed naturally. Lucas told stories about his travels, about the strange and wonderful things he had seen on the road. Beatrice laughed at his description of trying to catch a runaway pig in Nevada, and the sound of her laughter made something warm bloom in Lucas's chest. "Tell me something," Beatrice said as they finished eating. "Why do you keep moving? What are you running from?" The question caught Lucas off guard. He was quiet for a long moment, considering whether to answer honestly. Finally, he said, "I suppose I am running from becoming my father." "What do you mean?" Lucas leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "My father was a good man, but he was broken by loss. When the drought took our cattle, it took his spirit too. He gave up, just stopped trying, and I watched him fade away day by day until there was nothing left. I swore I would never let that happen to me. I figured if I kept moving, kept working, I could outrun that fate." "But you cannot outrun yourself," Beatrice said softly. "And you cannot avoid loss by avoiding connection. All you do is guarantee you will be alone when the hard times come." Her words struck deep, touching a truth Lucas had been avoiding for years. "When did you become so wise?" he asked, trying to lighten the moment. "When I learned that love is worth the risk of loss," Beatrice said. "I loved David with everything I had. His death nearly destroyed me. And then I loved Rose with even more intensity, if that was possible. Losing her has been the worst pain I have ever known, but I do not regret loving her, not for 1 second. Those 2 months I had with her were precious beyond measure." Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. "You are remarkable, Beatrice Jenkins." She colored slightly, but she did not pull away. "I am just trying to survive, same as everyone else." "No," Lucas insisted. "You are doing more than surviving, you are living. You are choosing to keep going despite everything. That takes courage." Beatrice turned her hand over, linking her fingers with his. "You make me feel brave," she said quietly. "When you are here, I feel like I can face tomorrow." The air between them shifted, becoming charged with something neither had planned for but both recognized. Lucas stood, still holding her hand, and Beatrice stood with him. They were close enough now that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell the faint scent of lavender she wore. "Beatrice," he said, his voice rough, "I need to be honest with you. I came to this town as a drifter, planning to move on as soon as my horse was rested. But now I find I do not want to leave, and it is not because of the town or the work, it is because of you." Her breath caught. "Lucas, you do not have to say anything," he continued quickly. "I know it has not been long since you lost Rose. I know you are still grieving. I am not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that you have become important to me, more important than anyone has been in a very long time." Beatrice lifted her free hand to touch his face, her palm resting against his bearded cheek. "I thought I would never feel anything again except pain," she whispered. "But when I am with you, I feel something else, something light and warm. It frightens me." "Why does it frighten you?" "Because I am afraid to lose it, to lose you. I cannot bear another loss, Lucas." He covered her hand with his own, holding it against his face. "Life has no guarantees," he said, "but I can promise you this, I am not going anywhere unless you want me to. I am done running." Tears spilled down Beatrice's cheeks, but they were different from the tears of grief he had seen that first day. These were tears of something new, something tentative but real. "Stay," she whispered. "Please stay." Lucas pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, pressing her face against his chest. He held her gently, aware of how fragile she still was, how much she had endured. They stood like that for a long time, simply holding each other, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. That night marked a turning point. From then on, the nature of their relationship began to shift. They still talked for hours, still walked to the cemetery together, but now there were also stolen glances and deliberate touches, hands brushing as they passed dishes at dinner, shoulders touching as they sat together on her small porch watching the sunset. The town noticed, of course. Grass Valley was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business. Mrs. Chen smiled knowingly when Lucas returned to the boarding house each evening. Mr. Hawkins made pointed comments about Lucas settling down. The widow Patterson, who had known Beatrice since she first arrived in town, stopped by the cabin one afternoon with a basket of fresh eggs and a gentle warning. "I am glad to see you smiling again, dear," Mrs. Patterson said as Beatrice accepted the eggs. "But do be careful with your heart. You have been through so much." "Lucas is a good man," Beatrice said quietly. "I am sure he is," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "But he is also a drifter. Men like that have a hard time staying in one place no matter how much they might want to." After Mrs. Patterson left, Beatrice found herself troubled by the woman's words. That evening, when Lucas arrived with fresh fish he had caught in the creek, she decided to address her concerns directly. "Lucas, what do you want from life?" she asked as they prepared the fish for cooking. He looked up, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what are your plans, your dreams? You said you were done running, but what does that actually mean?" Lucas set down the knife he had been using. "It means I want to stay here in Grass Valley with you. But for how long? What will you do here? You have been taking odd jobs, but that is not sustainable forever. Winter will come again and work will be scarce." "I have been thinking about that," Lucas admitted. "Mr. Hawkins mentioned that the man who owns the stable is looking to retire. He wants to sell the business to someone who knows horses and is willing to work hard. I have some money saved. Not much, but maybe enough for a down payment. I could make the rest in payments over time." Beatrice's eyes widened. "You want to buy the stable?" "I do," Lucas said. "If I stay here, I need real work, something permanent, and I know horses. I am good with them. It makes sense." "It does make sense," Beatrice agreed slowly. "But Lucas, you need to be sure. You need to be certain that this is what you want, not just something you are doing because of me." Lucas moved around the table and took both her hands in his. "Beatrice, I am doing this because I want a life. A real life, not just endless wandering. Yes, meeting you made me realize what I was missing. But the choice to stay, to build something here, that is mine. I'm not doing this for you. I am doing this for us, for the possibility of us." The word "us" hung in the air, heavy with promise and potential. Beatrice felt her heart begin to race. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to think about a future, about happiness, about love. "I am still grieving," she said, needing him to understand. "Some days I am fine and other days I can barely function. Rose has only been gone 2 months. I do not know if I am ready for this." "Then we will take it slow," Lucas said. "There is no rush. I am not going anywhere." Beatrice looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life at her darkest moment, and she felt something shift inside her. Not the erasure of grief, but the addition of something else. Hope. "Okay," she said softly. "Let us see where this goes." Lucas smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it brought fresh tears to her eyes. The next day, Lucas went to speak with Mr. Daniels, the stable owner. The man was indeed eager to retire and join his daughter in San Francisco. They worked out terms that Lucas could manage, with a small down payment and monthly installments. Within a week, Lucas Yates was the new owner of the Grass Valley stable. The work was hard but satisfying. Lucas rose before dawn to feed and water the horses, mucked out stalls, repaired tack, and helped travelers coming through town. Word spread that the stable had a new owner who knew his business, and trade picked up. Lucas found himself making enough not just to pay Mr. Daniels, but to save a little besides. His evenings, however, belonged to Beatrice. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, sharing meals and conversation, slowly building something real between them. Lucas was careful not to push, aware of how raw her grief still was. Sometimes, in the middle of a conversation, Beatrice would suddenly grow quiet, her eyes distant, and Lucas learned to simply be present with her in those moments, offering silent support. One evening in late March, as they sat on her porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, Beatrice said, "I went to the cemetery today and I did not cry." Lucas looked at her, understanding the significance of this statement. "How did that feel?" "Strange," Beatrice admitted. "Guilty, almost. Like I was betraying her memory by not falling apart." "You are not betraying anyone," Lucas said firmly. "Grief is not measured by tears. You will always love Rose, you will always miss her. But you are allowed to heal. You are allowed to live." Beatrice leaned her head against his shoulder. "I am beginning to believe that," she said quietly. "Because of you." "Not because of me," Lucas corrected. "Because of your own strength. I am just here to remind you of it when you forget." They sat in comfortable silence until the stars began to appear. Then Beatrice turned to look at him, and Lucas saw something new in her eyes. A question, maybe. An invitation. "Will you stay tonight?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not for anything improper. I just do not want to be alone." "Of course," Lucas said without hesitation. That night, Lucas slept on the floor beside her bed, wrapped in blankets, listening to her breathe. It was the most intimate thing he had done in years, this simple act of keeping watch over someone he cared about. When morning came and Beatrice woke to find him still there, her smile was worth every uncomfortable moment of sleeping on hard wood. After that, it became an unspoken arrangement. Lucas would spend his evenings with Beatrice, and more often than not, he would stay the night, always respectful of her space and her grief. The people in town talked, but Lucas did not care, and Beatrice found she did not either. Let them talk. For the first time since losing Rose, she did not feel alone in the darkness. Spring arrived in full force, bringing wildflowers to the hillsides and warmth to the air. Beatrice began to take an interest in life again. She planted a vegetable garden behind her cabin, something she had not had the heart to do the previous year. Lucas helped her turn the soil and build a fence to keep out deer and rabbits. "We should plant roses," Beatrice said one afternoon as they worked together in the sun. "Along the fence line. Red ones, like David used to bring me." It was the first time she had spoken David's name without crying, and Lucas understood what a milestone that represented. "That is a fine idea," he said. "We can order bushes from Sacramento. They should arrive in time for planting. Will you help me?" Beatrice asked. "With the roses, of course." "No," Beatrice said, standing and brushing dirt from her hands. "I mean with everything, with life. Will you stay and help me figure out how to live again?" Lucas set down the shovel and crossed to her, taking her dirty hands in his. "Beatrice, I will stay for as long as you want me. Not just to help you, but because there is nowhere else I want to be." "Even on the hard days?" she asked. "Because there will be hard days. Days when I am sad for no reason. Days when I miss her so much I can barely breathe." "Especially on the hard days," Lucas said. "That is what people do when they care about each other. They stay." Beatrice stood on her toes and kissed him then, a soft press of lips that sent electricity through Lucas's whole body. It was their first real kiss, and it tasted like dirt and possibility and new beginnings. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. "I think I am falling in love with you," Beatrice whispered, "and that terrifies me." "I know I am falling in love with you," Lucas said, "and it terrifies me too. But I am doing it anyway." They stood in the garden, holding each other, and overhead a hawk circled lazily in the blue sky, its cry echoing across the valley. That night, as they sat at dinner, Lucas brought up something he had been thinking about for weeks. "Beatrice, I know we have not talked about the future much, but I need to ask you something." She set down her fork, giving him her full attention. "What is it?" "Would you consider marrying me?" Lucas asked, the words coming out in a rush. "Not right now, not until you are ready, but someday. When enough time has passed and you feel whole again. Would you consider it?" Beatrice was quiet for a long moment, and Lucas felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Then she smiled, and it was like watching the dawn break. "Yes," she said simply. "Someday when I am ready, yes. I would be honored to marry you, Lucas Yates." Relief and joy flooded through Lucas. "There is no timeline," he assured her. "We have all the time in the world." "I know," Beatrice said. "And that is what makes it possible. You are not pushing, you are just offering. Offering a future when I am ready to reach for it." Summer came, hot and dry but not unbearably so. The stable business thrived under Lucas's management. He hired a young man named Timothy to help with the heavier work, giving himself more time to spend with Beatrice. Together, they tended her garden, which flourished under their care. The rose bushes they had planted bloomed in July, filling the air with sweet fragrance. Beatrice had good days and bad days, but the good ones began to outnumber the bad. She started baking again, something she had loved before Rose's death. She brought pies and breads to the neighbors, slowly rebuilding connections that grief had strained. Mrs. Patterson remarked to anyone who would listen that it was good to see Beatrice smile again. On a warm evening in August, Lucas and Beatrice walked up to the cemetery together as they had done so many times before. But this time felt different. Beatrice stood beside Rose's grave and spoke in a steady voice. "Hello, my sweet girl. I brought your father's namesake today. Well, not his namesake exactly, but the man I am going to marry when I am ready." She glanced at Lucas, who stood quietly beside her. "His name is Lucas, and he is good and kind. He would have loved you so much. I wish you could have met him." She knelt and placed a bouquet of roses on the grave. "I want you to know that loving him does not mean I love you less. You will always be my daughter. You will always have a piece of my heart. But I am learning that hearts can hold many loves at once, and there is room for both you and him." Lucas felt tears prick his eyes as he listened. When Beatrice stood, he took her hand. "You did well," he said quietly. "I am trying," Beatrice replied. "Every day I am trying to honor her memory by living the kind of life she would have wanted for me. A happy life." They walked back down the hill as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. At the cabin, Beatrice turned to Lucas and said, "I am ready." "Ready for what?" "To marry you. To really plan a future. I thought I would need more time, but I do not. I know what I want, and I want you. I want us." Lucas pulled her close, his heart soaring. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Beatrice said firmly. "Rose will always be part of my life, but I cannot let grief be the only thing that defines me. I want to live, Lucas. I want to be your wife." They were married in September, on a crisp autumn day when the leaves were just beginning to turn. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church with the whole town in attendance. Mrs. Chen cried happy tears. Mr. Hawkins gave a rambling toast at the reception. Mrs. Patterson told everyone that she had known all along it would work out. Beatrice wore a cream-colored dress with lace at the collar, and Lucas wore his best suit, freshly pressed. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed Beatrice with all the love he had been holding in his heart, and she kissed him back with equal fervor. That night, in the cabin that was now officially theirs, Lucas carried Beatrice over the threshold and set her down gently. The empty cradle still stood against the wall, and seeing it, Lucas asked, "Do you want to put that away?" Beatrice looked at the cradle for a long moment, then shook her head. "No, not yet, maybe not ever. It is a reminder of what was, but it does not have to be a symbol of only loss. Maybe someday it will hold another baby, our baby." Lucas felt his breath catch. "Would you want that? Another child?" I do not know yet, Beatrice admitted. The thought terrifies me. The idea of loving another child, of risking that kind of loss again. But I also think Rose would want me to be a mother again. She would want her siblings even if she could never meet them. We do not have to decide now, Lucas said, pulling her close. We have time. We have time, Beatrice agreed, and those words felt like a gift. The next months were filled with the quiet joys of married life. Lucas continued to run the stable, building a reputation for fair dealing and excellent care. Beatrice kept their home and tended her garden, even as the weather turned cold. They hosted dinners for friends, attended church socials, and slowly became fixtures of the Grass Valley community. Winter came, and with it the anniversary of Rose's death. Lucas worried about how Beatrice would handle it, but she surprised him with her strength. They visited the grave together, and Beatrice spoke to her daughter about the year that had passed, about Lucas, about the life she was building. I am happy, Beatrice told the small grave marker. I did not think I would ever say that again, but I am. I hope wherever you are happy too. In the spring of 1879, Beatrice missed her monthly courses. At first, she was afraid to hope, afraid to even speak the possibility aloud. But as weeks passed and the signs became unmistakable, she finally told Lucas one evening as they sat by the fire. I am with child, she said, her voice trembling. Lucas looked up from the harness he had been mending, his eyes wide. Are you certain? As certain as I can be. I have felt this before. He set aside his work and crossed to kneel before her chair, taking her hands. How do you feel about it? Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. Terrified, joyful, grateful, all of it at once. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose this baby too? What if you don not? Lucas countered gently. What if everything goes perfectly? We cannot live in fear of what might happen. We can only move forward with hope. Hope, Beatrice repeated. You filled my arms with hope when they were empty, and now maybe they will hold a baby again. Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. We will face whatever comes together. The pregnancy progressed, and Beatrice grew stronger and more confident with each passing week. The town rallied around them, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Mrs. Patterson insisted on being present at the birth. Mrs. Chen brought over special teas and soups meant to ensure a healthy baby. Lucas was attentive to Beatrice's every need, sometimes to the point of being comically overprotective. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest every afternoon, and worried constantly about her health. Beatrice found his concern endearing, even when it was excessive. I am not made of glass, she reminded him one afternoon as he tried to prevent her from weeding the garden. I know, Lucas said, but I cannot help worrying. You and this baby are everything to me. Beatrice softened, understanding the fear beneath his overprotectiveness. We are going to be fine, she assured him. I can feel it. This baby is strong. As her belly grew, they spent evenings planning for the future. They discussed names, argued playfully about whether the baby would have Beatrice's green eyes or Lucas's brown ones, and made preparations for the birth. Lucas repaired and repainted the cradle, the one that had stood empty for so long. Watching him work on it, Beatrice felt a profound sense of peace. The cradle was not a symbol of loss anymore. It was a symbol of hope renewed. On a warm night in October, Beatrice went into labor. Lucas rode frantically to fetch Mrs. Patterson and the doctor, then paced outside the cabin like a caged animal while the women worked inside. Mrs. Chen arrived to help, and between the three of them, they coached Beatrice through the long hours of labor. Dawn was breaking when the baby finally arrived, filling the cabin with lusty cries. Mrs. Patterson came to the door, her face wreathed in smiles. You have a son, she told Lucas. a healthy, strong boy, and Beatrice is fine, tired but fine. Lucas rushed inside to find his wife propped up in bed, holding a red-faced, squalling infant. When Beatrice saw him, her face lit up with a joy so pure it took his breath away. "Look," she whispered. "Our son." Lucas knelt beside the bed, looking down at the tiny person they had created. The baby had a shock of dark hair and seemed determined to announce his displeasure at being born. "He has lungs," Lucas observed, awed. "He certainly does," Beatrice agreed, laughing through happy tears. "Lucas, we did it. We made a family." "You did the hard part," Lucas said, kissing her forehead. "You are incredible." They decided to name him James David Yates, honoring both Lucas's father and Beatrice's first husband. It felt right to acknowledge the past while celebrating the future. The first weeks with James were exhausting but wonderful. Beatrice, though tired, seemed to bloom with the baby in her arms. The fear that had plagued her during pregnancy faded as James thrived, growing stronger each day. Lucas found himself completely enamored with his son, marveling at tiny fingers and toes, at the way James would grip his finger with surprising strength. One evening, as Beatrice nursed James, she said, "I need to tell you something." Lucas looked up from the account books he had been reviewing. "What is it?" "I have been visiting Rose's grave less often," Beatrice admitted. "Not because I love her less, but because I am so busy with James, and I feel guilty about it." Lucas set aside his work and came to sit beside her. "Beatrice, Rose would understand. She would want you to be present with your living child." "I know," Beatrice said, "but I worry about forgetting, about letting her memory fade." "You will never forget her," Lucas said firmly. "She is part of who you are, and we will make sure James knows about his sister. We will tell him about her when he is old enough to understand." Beatrice looked down at James, who had fallen asleep at her breast, milk-drunk and content. "He looks a bit like her, you know, around the eyes. Or maybe I am just imagining it." "Maybe he does," Lucas allowed. Families have a way of carrying pieces of each other forward. As James grew, he proved to be a happy, energetic baby. He smiled early and often, especially at his father, which delighted Lucas beyond measure. The stable continued to prosper, allowing Lucas to hire additional help so he could spend more time with his family. Beatrice divided her time between caring for James and maintaining their home, and she seemed more content than Lucas had ever seen her. One afternoon in the spring, when James was 6 months old, Beatrice suggested they have a picnic up by the cemetery. It was not a morbid suggestion, she explained, but rather a way to include Rose in their family outing. They spread a blanket under the oak tree near Rose's grave, and James sat between them, chewing on his fist and babbling contentedly. Beatrice talked to Rose as if she were there, telling her about James's latest accomplishments, about how he was trying to crawl, about the funny faces he made when he tasted new foods. "I think she would have been a wonderful big sister," Beatrice said, looking at the grave marker. "I think she would have loved him." "I know she would have," Lucas agreed, bouncing James on his knee. As they sat there, James suddenly let out a delighted squeal and lunged forward, executing a clumsy but successful crawl across the blanket. It was his first real crawl, and Beatrice laughed with joy, scooping him up and covering his face with kisses. "Did you see that?" she exclaimed. "He crawled." "I saw it," Lucas said, grinning broadly. "Our son is a genius." "Of course he is," Beatrice agreed, hugging James close. Then, looking at Rose's grave, she added softly, "Thank you for watching over him, sweet girl." They packed up the picnic as the sun began to lower in the sky, and as they walked back down the hill, James in Lucas's arms, Beatrice felt a profound sense of completeness. Her life had not turned out the way she originally planned. She had known terrible loss, but she had also found unexpected love and built a family from hope and determination. That evening, after James was asleep in the cradle, Beatrice and Lucas sat together on their porch watching the stars appear. "You ever regret it?" Beatrice asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Stopping that day. Coming to my door, staying in Grass Valley." "You could have kept traveling, kept being free." Lucas pulled her closer to his side. "I was never free when I was traveling," he said. "I was just lost. You gave me a home, Beatrice. You gave me a purpose. You gave me a family. I regret nothing. Even the hard parts. Even when I was drowning in grief and could barely speak to you. Especially then," Lucas said. "Because those hard parts led to this, to us, to James, to everything good in my life." Beatrice tilted her face up to kiss him, pouring all her love and gratitude into that kiss. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I love you, Lucas Yates." "I love you too, Beatrice Yates," he replied, "now and always." The years that followed were filled with the ordinary magic of family life. James grew into a curious, adventurous toddler who kept his parents constantly on their toes. When he was 2, Beatrice became pregnant again, and this time the fear was less consuming. She had carried one baby successfully to term and beyond. She could do it again. Their second child, a daughter they named Catherine Rose, arrived on a snowy December day. She was quieter than her brother had been, with solemn green eyes that seemed to take in everything. Beatrice wept when she held her, tears of joy mixed with the bittersweet knowledge that Rose would never meet her namesake. "She is perfect," Lucas said, looking at his daughter with wonder. "They both are," Beatrice agreed, watching as James peered curiously at his new sister. "We are blessed," Lucas had to agree. 2 years ago, he had been a drifter with no real home and no real purpose. Now he had a wife he adored, 2 healthy children, a successful business, and roots that went deep into the California soil. Life was not always easy. There were hard days when money was tight or when the children were sick. There were nights when Beatrice would wake from dreams of Rose, and Lucas would hold her while she cried. But through it all, they had each other. On a spring morning in 1882, the family made their regular visit to Rose's grave. James, now nearly 3, carried a handful of wildflowers he had picked. Catherine, just a few months old, slept peacefully in Beatrice's arms. "We brought flowers, Rose," James announced importantly, laying them carefully on the grave. He did not fully understand who Rose was yet, but his parents had taught him to be gentle and respectful at this spot. "Good job, sweetheart," Beatrice said, her voice thick with emotion. Lucas put his arm around her shoulders and they stood there as a family, the living and the dead connected by love and memory. A breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree and a robin sang from a nearby branch. "You think she knows?" Beatrice asked quietly. "Do you think she knows how much I love her still?" "I think love transcends all boundaries," Lucas said. "If there is any justice in the universe, she knows." They stayed a while longer, James running between the graves with the boundless energy of a toddler, Catherine sleeping peacefully, and Beatrice and Lucas simply being present in this place that held so much of their story. When they finally returned home, Lucas had to open the stable and Beatrice had laundry to do. Life went on as it always did, with its demands and routines. But that evening, after the children were asleep and the chores were done, Lucas found Beatrice standing in front of the empty cradle. They had moved it to the corner when Catherine outgrew it, and soon James would be too big for his small bed, and Catherine would need the cradle again. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, coming to stand beside her. "I am thinking about that day you found me," Beatrice said. "When I was crying over this empty cradle, so lost in grief I could not see a way forward. If someone had told me then that I would be standing here 4 years later with a husband I love and 2 living children, I would not have believed them. But here you are, Lucas said. Here we are, Beatrice corrected. You filled my empty arms with hope, Lucas. Literally. You helped me believe I could love again, could be a mother again. You gave me a future when I thought mine was over. Lucas turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You did the real work, he said. I just showed up. You chose to heal, you chose to hope, you chose to live. That was all you. It was both of us, Beatrice insisted. Everything good in my life now exists because you stopped that day instead of riding past. Because you cared enough to get involved. Because you stayed. They held each other in the quiet cabin, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together. Outside, the California night was alive with sound. Crickets singing, wind rustling through trees, somewhere in the distance a dog barking. Inside, there was only warmth and love and the steady presence of family. Thank you, Beatrice whispered against Lucas's chest. For everything. Thank you, Lucas replied. For letting me stay. For giving me a home. For loving me. From the bedroom came a small cry. Catherine was waking, ready to nurse. Beatrice pulled away from Lucas with a smile, the moment of reflection giving way to the demands of motherhood. Lucas watched her go, then checked on James, who was sprawled across his bed in the boneless way of sleeping children. This, Lucas thought, was what he had been searching for all those years on the road. Not gold or glory or grand adventure, but this. A home, a family, a purpose. He had found it in the most unexpected way, by stopping to investigate a woman's tears, by caring enough to get involved, by choosing to stay when every instinct told him to run. Life continued in Grass Valley with its rhythms of seasons and growth. The stable became one of the most respected in the region, known for the quality of care Lucas provided. Beatrice became a pillar of the community, organizing church socials and helping new mothers navigate the challenges of parenthood. Their children grew, James becoming an energetic boy who loved horses just like his father, Catherine developing into a thoughtful child who loved books and quiet observation. When James was 7 and Catherine was 5, Beatrice became pregnant once more. This pregnancy was different from the others, harder on her body, and both she and Lucas worried. But in the end, she delivered a healthy boy they named Michael, and the family felt complete. On Michael's first birthday, they held a party that brought together half the town. Mrs. Chen brought dumplings. Mrs. Patterson brought her famous apple pie. Mr. Hawkins, now semi-retired, told rambling stories about the old days. The children ran wild in the yard while the adults sat in the shade and talked. As Lucas watched his wife laugh with her friends, his children play in the sunshine, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. He thought about the man he had been when he rode into Grass Valley all those years ago, lost and aimless and alone. That man would hardly recognize the life he had now. Later that evening, after all the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Beatrice found Lucas standing in the yard, looking up at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "About how different my life is now from what I thought it would be," Lucas said. "About how stopping at your cabin that day changed everything." Beatrice leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you know what I was thinking about that day, right before you knocked on the window?" "What?" "I was wondering if I could go on, if I had the strength to keep living with so much pain. I was not thinking about ending my life exactly, but I was not sure I wanted to keep existing in so much agony." Lucas's arm tightened around her. He had never known how close she had been to the edge that day. "And then you appeared," Beatrice continued. "This stranger who had no reason to care, who could have just kept riding. But you stopped. You listened. You stayed. You gave me a reason to believe tomorrow might be better than today. You gave me something too, Lucas said. A home, a family, a reason to stop running from life. They stood together under the vast California sky, two souls who had found each other at their lowest points and built something beautiful from shared grief and hope. The journey had not been easy. There had been pain and loss and moments of doubt. But through it all, they had held onto each other and chosen love over fear. Inside the house, one of the children cried out in sleep. Beatrice started to pull away, but Lucas held her a moment longer. I love you, he said simply. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Beatrice replied. Thank you for filling my empty arms with hope. Thank you for giving me a future. They went inside together, checking on the children, ensuring all was well. James had kicked off his blankets, so Lucas covered him again. Catherine had her favorite doll clutched in her arms. Michael slept peacefully in the cradle that had once been empty but now held precious life. In the morning, there would be work to do. The stable needed managing, the children needed tending, the house needed maintaining. But for now, in the quiet of the night, Lucas and Beatrice simply appreciated what they had built together. Years continued to pass. The children grew, each developing their own personality and interests. James eventually took over running the stable when Lucas decided to slow down in his 50s. Catherine became a teacher at the local school. Michael showed an aptitude for numbers and began keeping books for various businesses in town. Lucas and Beatrice grew old together, their hair going gray, their bodies moving more slowly, but their love remaining constant. They still made regular visits to Rose's grave, though less frequently as the years passed. On the 20th anniversary of Rose's death, they stood beside that oak tree, their adult children and grandchildren around them. Tell us about her, one of the grandchildren asked. So Beatrice told the story of Rose, the daughter who had lived only 2 months but whose impact had been immeasurable. She told about the grief that had nearly consumed her, about the traveling cowboy who had stopped at her cabin, about the hope that had been born from despair. The grandchildren listened, rapt, and later James told his mother, I am glad you met Father. I am glad he stopped that day. So am I, Beatrice said. Every single day I am grateful. As the sun began to set, the family walked back down the hill together, 3 generations bound by love and story. Lucas walked slowly, his hand in Beatrice's, their fingers intertwined as they had been for decades. That night, lying in bed in the cabin that had been their home for over 40 years, Beatrice turned to Lucas. You remember what you said to me that first day? She asked. Which part? Lucas replied, his voice rough with age. When I said I was nothing without David and Rose. You said I was still here and that was not nothing. I remember. You were right, Beatrice said. I am still here, we are still here, and it has been a beautiful life. Lucas pulled her close and she nestled against him the way she had done thousands of times before. The best life, he agreed. They fell asleep like that, 2 souls who had found each other in darkness and built a lifetime of light. The cradle that had once been empty had been filled many times over. The arms that had held only grief had held children and grandchildren. The hope that Lucas had offered that long ago February day had blossomed into something neither could have imagined. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human joy and sorrow. But inside that cabin, warmth and love endured, a testament to the power of compassion, the resilience of the human heart, and the transformative nature of hope. In the end, that was their legacy. Not just the children they raised or the business Lucas built, but the proof that even in our darkest moments when life has stripped us bare and left us with nothing but empty cradles and broken dreams, hope can find us. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a traveling cowboy who stops when he could have kept riding, who listens when he could have turned away, who stays when he could have left. And sometimes that hope grows into something more profound than we could have imagined. A love that heals, a family that endures, a life that matters. Beatrice Jenkins, who had once been certain her story was over, had instead found that it was only beginning. Lucas Yates, who had spent years running from connection, had discovered that true freedom came from choosing to stay. Together, they had written a new chapter, one filled with love and loss and redemption and grace. The empty cradle had been filled. The broken heart had been mended. The lost had been found. And in a small cabin in Grass Valley, California, a love story that began with tears ended with joy, proving that even in the wild, harsh world of the 1870s West, hope could survive and love could triumph. As the years continued to unfold, Lucas and Beatrice remained inseparable, their bond only deepening with time. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, mourned the loss of friends and neighbors, and welcomed great-grandchildren into the world. Through it all, they remained each other's constants, proof that sometimes the best thing we can do is stop running and choose to be present for another person's pain. The traveling cowboy had found a home. The grieving mother had found hope. And together, they had found something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. A second chance at happiness, built on a foundation of shared sorrow and sustained by the daily choice to love and be loved. Their story became part of Grass Valley's folklore, told and retold. The tale of the drifter who heard a woman crying and stopped to help, and in doing so, found his destiny. It was a reminder to everyone who heard it that compassion matters, that showing up matters, that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the trajectory of someone's entire life. Lucas never regretted stopping that February day. Beatrice never regretted opening her door. And in the end, that was perhaps the greatest gift they gave each other. The courage to remain open to possibility even when hope seemed impossible. The willingness to trust again even after devastating loss. And the faith that tomorrow might bring something better if they were brave enough to face it together. The empty cradle had been filled with hope, and that hope had grown into a beautiful, messy, imperfect, wonderful life. And that was more than enough. It was everything.